Joan Crawford was one of Hollywood's biggest stars, but behind the fame was a family story that remains deeply divided to this day. Their lives were shaped by tragedy from the very beginning, and even after growing up in one of Hollywood's most famous homes, they faced heartbreak, family conflict, and struggles that few people ever knew about. Join us as we uncover the heartbreaking lives of Joan Crawford's twin daughters and the family secrets that continued long after the cameras stopped rolling. The tragic beginning. On January 13, 1947, twin girls Kathy and Cynthia Crawford, who later became known as Sydney, entered the world under heartbreaking circumstances. They were born 8 minutes apart, with Kathy arriving first. The twins were premature, which meant they needed special medical care and remained under hospital supervision for several weeks after birth. From the moment they were born, their lives were marked by tragedy and uncertainty. Their biological mother was a 21-year-old woman named Theta Mildred Cotton. She had already been abandoned by the twins' biological father, J.W. Jordan, before the girls were even born. He walked away during the pregnancy and was nowhere to be found when the babies arrived. Left alone to care for 2 premature newborns, Theta faced an impossible situation. Only 7 days after giving birth, Theta died from kidney failure. Her death left Kathy and Cynthia without either parent. Their father had disappeared and their mother was gone. The newborn twins suddenly had no one to care for them. On January 20, 1947, custody of the babies was turned over to the Tennessee Children's Home Society. At the time, this organization was one of the most well-known adoption agencies in America, but it later became infamous because of the actions of its director, Georgia Tann. Investigations would eventually reveal that the organization had been involved in illegal and unethical adoption practices for years. Many children were taken from their families through fraud, deception, or outright kidnapping before being placed with adoptive parents who often had no idea about the true circumstances. Although Kathy and Cynthia were placed there after losing their mother, their connection to the Tennessee Children's Home has continued to attract attention because of the agency's controversial history. Their story became linked to one of the darkest chapters in American adoption history. Researchers also believe that Joan Crawford did not work directly with Georgia Tann herself. Instead, it is widely believed that the twins were located through Alice Howe, a Los Angeles baby broker who had previously helped Crawford arrange the adoption of her other children. Howe had already assisted Joan in adopting Christina and later Christopher, making her a trusted contact for the actress. While there is no evidence that Joan Crawford knew anything about the illegal practices happening inside the Tennessee Children's Home, the adoption network she relied on eventually traced back to that organization. By the late 1940s, Joan Crawford had already become one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Despite her demanding career, she wanted a large family. She had already adopted Christina and Christopher and hoped to welcome more children into her home. When Kathy and Cynthia entered her life, she embraced them as part of that dream. The twins did not immediately become Joan's legal daughters. Instead, they moved into her Brentwood home and lived with her for more than a year before the adoption was officially finalized. During that time, Joan cared for them as their mother, raising them alongside their older brother and sister. On June 11, 1948, the adoption became official. Kathy and Cynthia were now legally Joan Crawford's daughters. What had begun with loss and uncertainty seemed to be turning into a new beginning. The girls were growing up in a stable home with a mother who appeared determined to give them opportunities they would never have had otherwise. Several years later, Joan married Alfred Steele, the chairman of Pepsi-Cola, in 1955. Steele accepted the twins as his own children and became their adoptive father. He played that role until his death in 1959. His bond with the family was genuine, and he was even listed as Kathy's father on her obituary many years later, showing how completely he had become part of their lives. Although Kathy and Cynthia's story started with abandonment, loss, and uncertainty, they had finally found a family. But as they grew older, life inside one of Hollywood's most famous households would become far more complicated than anyone could have expected. Their difficult beginning was only the first chapter, because growing up in Joan Crawford's home would bring its own surprises. Growing up in Joan Crawford's mansion. Once Kathy and Cynthia became part of Joan Crawford's family, they entered a very different world from the one they had been born into. They grew up in a beautiful home in Brentwood, California, surrounded by movie stars, successful business leaders, and Hollywood glamour. But despite all the fame that surrounded them, Joan wanted her children to have a structured and responsible childhood. She believed that good habits were more important than luxury, and she worked hard to teach her children skills they would carry with them throughout their lives. Joan often described herself as a strict parent, but she insisted that her discipline always came with love and attention. She believed children should learn responsibility early so that it became a natural part of everyday life. Rather than doing everything for them, she encouraged her children to take care of themselves. The twins were expected to help around the house from a young age. They made their own beds every morning, washed dishes after meals, cleaned their bedrooms, and helped keep the house tidy. Joan also had them work in the garden by pulling weeds and helping with outdoor chores. Even caring for their own clothes became part of their daily routine. Once they were old enough to reach the sink by standing on a stool, they washed their shoelaces, polished their white shoes, and put away clean clothes themselves. It took several years before Kathy realized her mother was actually one of Hollywood's biggest stars. Around 1950, Joan invited friends to watch one of her older films, Humoresque, in the private theater behind their home. During one emotional scene, Kathy became frightened as she watched Joan's character walk toward the ocean. Believing her mother was really about to drown, the little girl burst into tears and clung tightly to Joan's arm. Joan comforted her and gently explained that it was only a movie and that nothing bad had happened. For Kathy, that moment was the first time she truly understood that the woman she called Mommy was also someone millions of people watched on movie screens. As the twins grew older, however, they would see their famous mother very differently from the sister who would one day write Mommy Dearest. Two different childhoods. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding Joan Crawford's family is how four children raised in the same home could remember their mother so differently. Christina Crawford, Joan's oldest adopted daughter, became famous after publishing Mommy Dearest in 1978. In the book, she described Joan as abusive, controlling, and unpredictable. The memoir shocked readers around the world and permanently changed the public's image of the Hollywood legend. But Kathy and her twin sister Sydney never accepted Christina's version of events. In fact, they spent much of their adult lives defending their mother and insisting that the woman they knew was nothing like the one described in the best-selling book. The twins admitted that Joan was a strict parent. There were rules in the house, chores had to be completed, and good manners were expected. However, they believed there was a huge difference between discipline and cruelty. To them, Joan's strictness came from wanting her children to become responsible adults, not from anger or a desire to control them. Throughout numerous interviews over the years, Kathy repeatedly described Joan as loving, kind, generous, and deeply devoted to her children. She said her mother was always available when they needed her, despite having one of the busiest careers in Hollywood. Joan worked long hours making movies, attending business meetings, and fulfilling public appearances. Yet Kathy remembered that her mother always made time for family. When the children were babies, they were often brought to the movie set so Joan could spend time with them during filming breaks. After work, they would all drive home together and eat dinner as a family. Sundays were reserved for church, picnics, or outings, giving Joan uninterrupted time with her children. According to Kathy, these moments mattered far more than the glamorous side of Hollywood. Her memories centered on ordinary family life rather than movie premieres or celebrity parties. Joan herself often wrote about her parenting philosophy. She believed the greatest gift a parent could give was preparing children to stand on their own feet. In her view, children needed responsibilities, guidance, education, and love. She believed independence was something that had to be taught from an early age. She also wrote that children should never remain dependent on their parents forever. Instead, mothers and fathers should gradually give them more responsibility so they could become confident adults. Joan felt that love and discipline could exist together and that one did not cancel out the other. For Kathy, the happiest part of her childhood was not living in a mansion or growing up around famous people. It was knowing that she felt loved. She often said Joan had given her confidence, courage, and countless happy memories. Those memories never changed, even after years of public controversy surrounding their family. As the twins entered adulthood, however, they discovered that life outside Hollywood would bring challenges their famous upbringing could never protect them from. Building lives beyond Hollywood, Kathy continued her education after high school by attending Vernon Court Junior College in Pennsylvania. Later, she enrolled at the Fashion Institute of Technology, where she further developed her creative interests. While she was studying, she also made a few television appearances during the 1960s. One of her best-known appearances came on the popular game show What's My Line, where she and her twin sister surprised both the audience and the panel during a holiday episode. Despite these television appearances, Kathy never seriously pursued a career as an actress. Unlike many children of Hollywood stars, she preferred building a life away from movie studios. While attending college, Kathy worked as a waitress. During that time, she met Jerome John Lalonde, a petty officer in the United States Navy. Their relationship grew steadily, and in December 1967, Joan Crawford proudly announced their engagement. The couple married on August 11, 1968, in Alexandria Bay, New York. Kathy added a personal touch to the ceremony by sewing her own wedding dress. It reflected both her creativity and her independent personality. Joan played an important role in the wedding. She supported her daughter's plans and helped celebrate the occasion with family and friends. Herbert L. Barnett, then chairman of Pepsi-Cola, escorted Kathy during the ceremony. Afterward, the reception featured Pepsi products and refreshments, reflecting the close connection between Joan's family and the company through her late husband, Alfred Steele. Following their wedding, Kathy and Jerome spent their honeymoon on a houseboat along the St. Lawrence River before settling in Norfolk, Virginia. Although Kathy stayed away from acting, she did make one memorable appearance in the 1979 film Roller Boogie. The production held auditions for nearly 300 roller skaters, but only around 50 performers were selected. Kathy earned one of those spots and appeared as a featured skater in the movie. It became one of the few times she stepped into the entertainment world as an adult. Sydney, who had been known as Cynthia during childhood, also chose a simple life away from Hollywood. She attended the University of Dubuque in Iowa, where she met fellow student John Jordan Mayer. The two married in 1967 and made their home in Dubuque. Rather than staying in California, Sydney embraced life in the Midwest. She often described herself as being more country than a city slicker, showing that she felt more comfortable with small-town living than the fast pace of Hollywood. To support her family, Sydney worked in a shoe store, earning about $150 a week. She also relied on part of the inheritance she received from Joan Crawford's estate. Together, she and John raised two sons, Jan, born in 1968, and Joel, born in 1971. Sydney enjoyed cooking, family life, and the quieter pace of rural Iowa. She had little interest in celebrity life or following in her mother's footsteps. While Joan Crawford spent decades under the spotlight, Sydney found happiness in ordinary routines and raising her children. For both sisters, adulthood was not about continuing a Hollywood legacy. They built lives centered on family, work, and personal interests instead of fame. They remained connected to their famous mother, but they chose success on their own terms. But even after leaving Hollywood behind, both sisters soon discovered that life could still bring heartbreak and unexpected struggles behind the smiles. From the outside, it might have seemed that Kathy and Sydney Crawford had everything they could ever need. They were the adopted daughters of one of Hollywood's biggest stars and had grown up in a beautiful home surrounded by wealth and famous faces. But as adults, their lives looked very different from the glamorous childhood many people imagined. Both women experienced divorce, financial hardship, and the everyday challenges that millions of ordinary people face. Sydney was the first to face major changes. She had married John Jordan Mayer in 1967, and together they built a quiet life in Iowa, raising two sons, Jan and Joel. For several years, life seemed stable, but in 1976, just 1 year before Joan Crawford's death, the marriage ended in divorce. The separation left Sydney in a difficult position. Suddenly, she was responsible for raising two young boys on her own. Although she had received part of Joan Crawford's estate after her mother's death, that money did not provide lifelong financial security. Like many single parents, Sydney had to find steady work while also caring for her children. In 1984, she accepted a job opportunity in Jackson, Mississippi, hoping it would give her family a fresh start. She relocated and expected to build a new life there. Unfortunately, things did not go as planned. Only 6 months after arriving, the job ended, leaving her unemployed with no stable source of income. The loss of her job pushed Sydney into one of the hardest periods of her life. Without regular work, she struggled to provide for herself and her family. She eventually relied on welfare to get by and even faced the possibility of having nowhere to live. During that difficult time, the Salvation Army stepped in to help, along with several friends who offered support when she needed it most. In a 1995 interview, she reflected on everything she had experienced by saying her life had gone from riches to rags to riches. She quickly explained what she meant. The riches she valued most were not money or expensive homes. Instead, she believed true wealth came from the people who loved and supported her. Friends, family, and meaningful relationships mattered far more to her than financial success. That perspective helped her move forward despite everything she had endured. Kathy also faced major challenges in adulthood. Although she had built a happy family with her husband, Jerome Lalonde, their marriage did not last. The couple divorced in 1984 after more than 15 years together. Like her sister, Kathy suddenly found herself adjusting to life as a single mother. She was raising 2 children while managing the responsibilities that came with providing for her family. Her famous last name did not shield her from everyday problems, and she worked hard to build a stable life through her own efforts. Rather than relying on her Hollywood background, Kathy chose practical work that made a difference in other people's lives. From 1996 until 2006, she worked as a bus aide for children with special needs. According to her daughter, Kathy genuinely loved the job. She cared deeply about the children she worked with and enjoyed helping them every day. It was not glamorous work, but it reflected the kind and caring person those close to her remembered. The toughest battle, however, wasn't with money or divorce. It was the public family war that erupted after Joan Crawford's death. 6. The family war that never ended. Fighting Christina Crawford. Over Joan's reputation. Joan Crawford died on May 10, 1977, bringing an end to one of Hollywood's most celebrated careers. For Kathy and Sidney, it was the loss of the woman they had always called their mother. They mourned her privately and believed she had given them a loving home and a happy childhood. But only a year later, their memories of Joan would be challenged in a way they never expected. In 1978, Christina Crawford published Mommy Dearest, a memoir describing what she claimed had been years of abuse, fear, and emotional cruelty at the hands of Joan Crawford. The book became an immediate bestseller, shocking readers with its disturbing stories. When the film adaptation was released in 1981, the controversy grew even larger. Suddenly, millions of people around the world knew Joan Crawford less as an Oscar-winning actress and more as the frightening mother portrayed in the book and movie. For Kathy and Sidney, the experience was heartbreaking. They believed the woman Christina described simply was not the mother they had known. While they understood that people could have different relationships with the same parent, they felt the book painted an unfair and deeply inaccurate picture of Joan. Rather than staying silent, both sisters chose to speak publicly. Kathy became especially vocal in defending their mother's reputation. She repeatedly explained that Joan had been loving, supportive, and always present when her children needed her. One of Kathy's most memorable public appearances came on Good Morning America on May 28, 1981, shortly after the release of the Mommy Dearest film. During the interview, she firmly rejected Christina's accusations. "My mother was a very warm person," Kathy said. "She was always there for us when we needed her. She was a working mother, but she always had time for us." She then dismissed Christina's memoir by saying, "Mommy Dearest is a great work of fiction. Christina must have been in another household." That statement quickly became one of Kathy's most widely quoted responses to the controversy. Even years after the book's release, Christina continued speaking publicly about her experiences and promoting new editions of Mommy Dearest. Kathy believed every new interview reopened old wounds for the family. The disagreement eventually grew into more than just a public debate. Kathy decided she could no longer ignore the attacks. She filed a defamation lawsuit against Christina in federal court in Pennsylvania. Rather than allowing the case to proceed through a lengthy trial, both sides agreed to resolve the dispute through arbitration. The outcome favored Kathy. The arbitrator ruled in her favor, awarding her $5,000 in damages, along with court costs. Although the financial award was relatively small, the decision meant much more than money. For Kathy, it represented standing up for herself, her sister, and what she believed was the truth. Kathy also spoke openly about why she believed Christina continued attacking Joan's reputation. During the legal proceedings and later interviews, she argued that Mommy Dearest had been created to defame the dead for commercial purposes. In her view, Christina had built a successful career by presenting the most negative possible image of their mother. Whether others agreed or disagreed, Kathy never changed her own position. Throughout the 1980s, 1990s, and 2000s, she consistently described Joan using the same words: loving, kind, generous, caring, and supportive. In one interview, Kathy said she had never seen her mother lose control in the way Christina described. She admitted that Joan sometimes became frustrated, as every parent does, but she never witnessed the acts of cruelty that had become famous through the book and film. When asked years later to finish the sentence, "My mother was..." Kathy became emotional before answering. "My mother was wonderful," she said. "She was very kind. She was strict, but all parents are to a certain degree. That's how we teach our children. She was just a very loving, caring person, and I miss her every day." She also explained that she no longer spent much time thinking about the disagreements with Christina. Instead, she focused on her own memories of growing up with Joan. Those memories, she said, were filled with encouragement, affection, and family moments she would always treasure. Even decades after Joan Crawford's death, the family remained divided. Christina never withdrew her claims, while Kathy and Sidney never stopped defending the woman they believed had given them a happy childhood. Their completely different memories created one of Hollywood's most enduring family disputes, a debate that continues to this day. After years of defending the mother who raised them, the twins finally turned their attention to the family they had never known, searching for the family they never knew. For most of their lives, Kathy and Sidney had very little interest in searching for their biological family. Joan Crawford was the only mother they had ever known, and they never felt that anything was missing. They were aware that they had been adopted, but they did not spend their childhood wondering about their birth parents. Their loyalty remained with Joan, and they always considered her their real mother. That changed more than 20 years after Joan's death. In 1999, Kathy saw a television program about the Tennessee Children's Home Society, the adoption agency where she and Sidney had first been placed as babies. The documentary explained the home's controversial history and encouraged adoptees to search for information about their biological families. Watching the program made the twins curious for the first time about where they had come from and whether any of their relatives were still alive. The sisters decided to begin searching together. What followed was an 18-month investigation that involved collecting records, reviewing court documents, and trying to piece together the story of their earliest days. The process was far from easy. Because their adoption records had been sealed for decades, they had to fight through the legal system to gain access to important information. Eventually, a court agreed to open the records, allowing them to learn details that had remained hidden since they were infants. The biggest surprise came when they discovered that their biological father, J.W. Jordan, was still alive and living in Friendship, Tennessee. After believing for so many years that both of their birth parents were gone, the news was almost impossible to believe. Sidney was the first to meet him. A friend drove her to a small pond where her father was waiting. Years later, she remembered that neither of them knew exactly what to say. According to Sidney, he simply asked, "What do we do?" She answered, "I don't know. What do you do?" He smiled and replied, "Why don't you give me some sugar?" before they shared a kiss. It was an emotional and awkward meeting, but it marked the beginning of a relationship that neither of them had expected to have. The reunion did not stop there. Kathy and Sidney also met biological siblings and other members of their extended family. They finally learned about the people they had been separated from as newborns and began building new relationships. Sidney eventually moved closer to her biological relatives and even worked for the family business, giving her more time to get to know them. Sadly, the reunion was shorter than anyone had hoped. Only about 3 years after reconnecting with his daughters, J.W. Jordan died from stomach cancer. Although they had lost many years together, the twins were grateful they had the chance to meet him before it was too late. The final years of Kathy and Sidney's lives would be marked by loss, illness, and the closing of the last chapter in Joan Crawford's family story. The final chapters. After reconnecting with their biological family in 1999, Kathy and Sidney finally had answers to questions that had remained unanswered for more than 50 years. Although they had spent almost their entire lives without knowing their birth relatives, the reunion gave them a chance to learn about their roots and form new relationships. For Sydney, the experience became an important part of her final years. She moved closer to members of her biological family and even worked in the family business. While she had always considered Joan Crawford her true mother, getting to know her biological relatives gave her a fuller understanding of where she came from. It was a chapter she had never expected to write, but one she appreciated deeply. Sadly, Sydney's life was cut short not long after those reunions. She passed away on October 14, 2007, at the age of 60. Her death marked the loss of one of Joan Crawford's strongest defenders. Throughout her life, Sydney had consistently rejected the stories presented in Mommy Dearest. She remained firm in her belief that Joan had been a loving, caring mother who had worked hard to give her children a happy home. In her later years, Kathy faced a difficult battle of her own. She was diagnosed with lung cancer and fought the illness privately. On January 10, 2020, she passed away at her home just 3 days before what would have been her 73rd birthday. Her death marked the end of an era. Both of Joan Crawford's twin daughters were now gone, leaving behind decades of interviews, public statements, and personal memories that stood in sharp contrast to those of their older siblings. Even decades after Joan Crawford's death, the debate over what kind of mother she truly was continues, with her children's very different memories keeping the story alive. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications.